Tonight, we're in the heart of the Bible Belt, where faith is everything, reputations are carefully guarded, and people believe they know their neighbors. But in the tiny town of Selma, Tennessee, a story exploded that no one could make sense of at first. A beloved minister is found dead inside his home, shot in the back. And then comes the detail that turns panic into full-blown terror. His wife is missing. Their 3 little girls are missing. And the family van is gone. For nearly a full day, the community fears the worst: an armed killer, a kidnapping, a family taken into the night. But when the missing wife is finally found, she isn't found as a victim. She's found at the center of an investigation that will divide a town, shock the entire country, and leave a question hanging for years. Was Mary Winkler a desperate woman pushed past her breaking point, or was she a calculating killer who got away with murder? This is Whispers of Crime. Selma is the kind of place where people wave from their porches, where sweet tea sits on tables, and where churches are everywhere you look. Religion isn't just a Sunday thing, it's a way of life. And in a community like that, the preacher and his family aren't just respected, they're watched, admired, and expected to be examples. That's who Matthew Winkler was to the people of the 4th Street Church of Christ. Matthew was young, charismatic, and new to being the head minister of his own congregation. He didn't miss services. His wife Mary and their daughters were always present too, week after week, like clockwork. So when the church doors opened for a Wednesday night service on March 22nd, 2006, people noticed immediately. The preacher wasn't there. Mary wasn't there. And the girls weren't there. At first, people waited. They figured there had to be a reason. Maybe they were running late. Maybe something came up. But as minutes turned into worry, a few church members decided they couldn't sit still anymore. Just behind the church was the parsonage, the home where Matthew, Mary, and their children lived. It was only a few minutes away. When the church members arrived, they knocked. They knocked again. No answer. They looked in the windows. They called out names. Nothing. And then something stood out. The key was on the inside of the door. The TV was on. But the house didn't respond like a house that had people inside. Eventually, they went in. They walked through the rooms calling for Matthew, for Mary, for the girls. Everything looked normal. Nothing appeared broken. Nothing looked ransacked. No signs of a struggle in the living areas. But one door was shut, the master bedroom. And the moment they opened it, the air changed. Matthew Winkler was on the floor beside the bed. He was on his back. And it was clear, this wasn't an accident, and this wasn't a medical emergency. He was dead. The foam around his mouth and nose, the way he lay there. Church members didn't need training to understand what they were seeing. They called 911. And then, in the living room of that quiet home, a group of people held hands and prayed. Not just for Matthew, but for Mary. And for the children. Because in their minds, there was only one explanation that fit their fear. If Matthew was dead, and the rest of the family was gone, then the wife and the girls must have been taken. Police arrived and began treating the home like a crime scene. They cleared the church members out, but interviewed them. They photographed rooms, took measurements, scanned for signs of forced entry, and tried to understand what kind of person could do something like this. The bedroom told the story, the rest of the house did not. Matthew had been shot with a 12-gauge shotgun. Not just shot, hit with birdshot that tore through him and left dozens upon dozens of pellets in his back. Investigators believed he had been shot while he was still in bed. Shot in the back. A detail like that matters, because if the victim is shot from behind in bed, it suggests there was no confrontation, no argument in the room, no chance to defend himself. And then investigators noticed something else that made them uneasy. The telephone. It wasn't just out of reach. It was disconnected from the wall, unplugged. If Matthew had survived even briefly, if he had tried to reach for help, the line wouldn't have worked. To investigators, that looked like intention, like someone didn't want help coming, not fast enough to save him. And now, as news of the killing spread through Selma, the fear grew. People weren't just grieving, they were scared. A pastor was dead in his own home. His family was missing, and no one knew who had done it or where the missing mother and children were. An Amber Alert was issued for 3 girls, the 1-year-old, the 6-year-old, and the 8-year-old. A description of the van went out too, and in a town where people locked their doors out of habit, not fear. Suddenly, fear was everywhere, because the question everyone asked was the same. If someone could do this to a preacher, who's safe? To understand why the story shocked people so deeply, you have to understand who the Winklers were supposed to be. Matthew came from what many people saw as religious royalty. Preacher. Son of a preacher. Grandson of a preacher. Great-grandson of a preacher. Ministry wasn't just his job, it was his identity, his family legacy. Mary came from a conservative Church of Christ background too. She was described as reserved, polite, not someone who pulled attention to herself. A woman who fit the expectations of her community, smiling, gentle, quiet. Matthew and Mary met at a Church of Christ-affiliated college. They started as friends, then started dating, and not long after, Matthew asked her to marry him. They left school due to money struggles. Matthew worked as a youth minister, and later in January 2005, the couple moved to Selma when Matthew got what he believed was his dream job, head minister of the 4th Street Church of Christ. To their congregation, it looked like a perfect scenario. A young minister with a bright future, a sweet wife, 3 little girls, a family that seemed safe. Until March 22nd, 2006. Until a bedroom door opened. Until Matthew lay dead on the floor, and Mary and the girls vanished. But the missing family wouldn't stay missing long. Almost 24 hours after Matthew's body was found, a van matching the Amber Alert description was spotted hundreds of miles away in Orange Beach, Alabama. That location alone raised questions. Why would a kidnapper take a family all the way to the coast? Why would they risk driving through multiple states with a high-profile Amber Alert active? Police approached the van carefully, guns drawn, because if this was an abduction, they didn't know what they were walking into. They ordered the driver to step out, and there she was, Mary Winkler, wearing a pink jumpsuit. She looked calm, almost blank. And what struck officers immediately was what she didn't do. She didn't ask why she was stopped. She didn't scream for help. She didn't ask what was happening. She didn't look around desperately, like someone expecting a kidnapper to appear. She simply complied. Police detained her and rushed to the van to check the children. The girls were alive, wrapped in blankets, confused, asking where their mother was going. And then police searched the van and found a shotgun. To investigators, it felt like the moment the story snapped into a new shape, because now the missing wife didn't look like a victim. She looked like a suspect. Mary was taken in for questioning, A corporal from the Alabama Bureau of Investigation, Stan Stabler, interviewed her at the Orange Beach Police Department. At first, Mary talked about background details, her marriage, her children. She appeared eerily calm for someone whose husband had been murdered and whose life had just collapsed. Then came the question that hovered over the entire interview. Why did you drive here? Mary said she wanted a last happy day with her daughters. A last day before things got bad. That answer is chilling because it suggests she believed she would be caught. Not if she was caught. When? The interviewer asked if anyone else was involved. An affair? A third party? Mary denied it. But she still didn't offer the kind of emotional reaction most people expect. And when asked directly what happened, she resisted. She didn't want to smear Matthew. That's how she put it. Then the interviewer turned toward the weapon. The shotgun police believed was used to kill Matthew. Mary admitted she had handled it. She admitted she had loaded it. But she didn't clearly admit pulling the trigger. She kept slipping into vague language, uncertain language, like she couldn't fully face what was being said. Then, gradually, the motive began to emerge. Mary described Matthew as someone who picked on her, nagged, wore her down, crushed her self-esteem. She explained it like this. She said she had nerve now. She had self-esteem now. And her ugly came out. And when her ugly came out, somebody ended up shot. Those words would echo for years, because people heard them in different ways. Some heard a woman finally snapping after years of emotional abuse. Others heard someone trying to soften the truth with strange phrasing, someone trying to excuse a cold act with a vague confession. Mary waived extradition and returned to Tennessee. And there, investigators from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation took another statement. In that statement, Mary still didn't fully confess to pulling the trigger, but she described the morning in a way that convinced investigators they had enough. She said she heard a loud boom. She wiped blood from Matthew's mouth. She told him she was sorry. And soon after, Mary Winkler was charged with murder. National news exploded, because the headline wasn't just murder. It was a pastor killed in his own bed, and the accused killer was his wife. The preacher's wife. In the Bible Belt. That combination made the story irresistible to the public, and painful to the people living inside it. Selma mourned. Hundreds packed into the church to grieve Matthew. Matthew's parents took custody of the 3 girls. And as Mary sat in jail, the town started splitting into sides. Because once the initial shock faded, another rumor began to spread. Maybe Matthew wasn't who people thought he was. People whispered about a temper. Some mentioned seeing Mary looking down, walking behind him, avoiding eye contact. Some claimed they saw bruises. Mary's family members would later say she changed after marriage, that she became quieter, less joyful. A neighbor described a moment where Matthew yelled about a dog in his yard, using words that didn't sound like gentle pastoral patience. But the biggest twist wasn't about his personality. It was about money. Investigators began to believe Matthew's death might have been connected to a financial disaster Mary was hiding. According to investigators, Mary got caught in a lottery scam. The kind where counterfeit checks come in the mail and the victim thinks they've won money until the bank discovers the checks are fake and demands repayment. Back then, banking systems could be slower to flag counterfeit checks immediately. So if someone deposited or cashed a check, the money could appear in the account until the check bounced later. Investigators alleged that Mary kept the money, and when the bank wanted it back, more than $100,000, Mary was in trouble. They believed she tried to cover that hole by moving money between accounts, writing checks to herself, and floating funds, what investigators called check kiting. And on March 21st, 2006, the day before Matthew was killed, Mary received a call from the bank. They wanted her to come in the next day to clear up the overdraft, and they told her to bring Matthew. That detail matters, because if Matthew came with her, then whatever was happening financially wouldn't stay hidden. Investigators believed that pressure was building, and March 22nd was the day it all crashed down. They believed that's why Matthew died. But even with these allegations, Mary was not separately charged with financial crimes in relation to the case. Still, the prosecution argued that money was the motive. The defense argued it wasn't money. The defense said it was abuse. And when the trial began, the entire country leaned in. Mary Winkler's murder trial started in April 2007. The courtroom was packed. Both families were there. The media descended on Selma as if the town itself was on trial. The prosecution's approach was direct. They argued there was no good reason to kill Matthew. They emphasized the gun. A 12-gauge pump shotgun isn't something that just goes off by mistake. It has to be racked to chamber a round. It has to be prepared. The prosecution used that mechanical reality as a point. If the gun was racked and ready, then it wasn't random. It suggested intention. And they returned to the core fact: Matthew was shot in the back while he slept. The defense's approach was different. They wanted the jury to believe that behind the church smiles was something darker. That Mary was a woman living in fear. That Matthew was controlling and cruel. Witnesses testified about harsh words they said they overheard. Mary's sister described Matthew dictating Mary's life, what she could do, where she could go, whether she could make decisions. But the question many people had was, if Matthew was truly that abusive, why didn't more people know? Why didn't she tell someone? Why didn't it come out sooner? Then Mary took the stand, and the courtroom held its breath. Because now, the only person alive who could describe what happened inside that marriage was speaking. Mary testified that Matthew knew about the finances. She said he directed her on what to do with deposits. She said he promised he would go to the bank, but kept putting it off. And then she described something else. She said she didn't stand up to him because she was afraid. She described his temper as explosive, flailing, furious, threats escalating from ugly words to terrifying claims. She testified that he threatened her with the shotgun many times, putting it in her face. She said he threatened to cut the brake lines of the van. She said he threatened that if she talked back, he would cut her into pieces. To hear those words in a Church of Christ courtroom was like dropping a match into dry paper. Some people believed her. Others didn't. Even an investigator involved in the case said later he believed Matthew never physically abused Mary. And there was no clear evidence of physical abuse reported by people close to them. That's what made the case so polarizing. Mary's testimony painted Matthew as a monster behind closed doors. But outside those doors, he was a minister people respected. Then came the moment that made the courtroom gasp. A shoe and a wig. The defense introduced items Mary said Matthew made her wear. Not for church, not for public, for sex. Mary testified about pornography, about being pressured into acts she described as humiliating, painful, and against what their faith allowed. The shock wasn't only the content, it was who was saying it, a preacher's wife. In a conservative religious community, talking about things people in that room likely never expected to hear spoken aloud. Some saw it as proof that Matthew lived a double life. Some saw it as a strategy to tear down the victim so the jury would sympathize with the defendant. But all of it circled back to the same question: what happened the morning Matthew died? Mary described a moment involving their baby crying. She claimed Matthew kicked her out of bed. She claimed she saw him covering the baby's mouth and nose to stop the crying, something she said he had done before. She described following him back into the bedroom, wanting to talk to him, wanting things to stop being so harsh between them. Then she said she found herself holding the gun. Did she point it? She said no. Did she pull the trigger? She said no. She repeatedly used language that placed distance between her and the exact moment of the shot, saying she didn't remember it happening. And the prosecution pressed her hard, pointing out how convenient that sounded. They challenged her with parts of earlier statements, about hearing a boom, about thinking it wasn't as loud as she expected, about wiping blood, about saying sorry. Mary's answers remained shaky, and the defense introduced a psychologist who testified that Mary suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and may have been in a dissociative state, arguing that trauma could explain memory gaps. By the time closing arguments came, the jury wasn't just deciding a legal category. They were deciding which story felt true. The prosecution said this was premeditated and intentional. The defense said this was the outcome of abuse, fear, and psychological breaking. And inside that jury room, it got heated. Some jurors believed Mary should walk. Some believed she should spend her life in prison. Some believed the money motive didn't matter, the abuse did. Others believed the abuse claims didn't justify a shotgun blast to the back. After hours of deliberation, the verdict landed like a shock. Not first-degree murder. Not second-degree murder. Voluntary manslaughter. A conviction that still implies intent, but suggests provocation. Mary Winkler would face a sentence of 3 to 6 years. At sentencing, Mary spoke about guilt, about thinking of Matthew every day, about loving him and missing him, about wishing they could have lived together. To Matthew's parents, those words didn't feel like comfort. They felt like salt in an open wound. They spoke about the son they lost, the family ripped apart, and the lack of remorse they believed they'd seen. The judge sentenced Mary to 3 years, with split confinement, 210 days incarceration, then additional time in a mental health facility. To Mary's supporters, it felt like mercy. To others, it felt like a slap on the wrist. And Selma stayed divided, even after the trial ended. Because the verdict didn't end the questions, it amplified them. After serving additional time, Mary returned to life outside. She was still a public figure, whether she wanted to be or not, and her life took turns that made people question her all over again. Reports surfaced that while out on bond, she had been seen smoking and drinking at a bar, something that clashed with the image people had of the quiet preacher's wife. Photos spread, and the public asked, was she always this person, hidden behind a church mask? Or was this what happens when someone finally escapes control and shame? Mary later appeared on a major talk show trying to explain herself. The host pressed her. The contradictions still didn't settle neatly, and while Mary fought to regain custody of her daughters, Matthew's parents fought to keep them, attempting to formalize custody through adoption and legal action. Eventually, An agreement was reached that allowed Mary to have her girls again. Years later, Mary revealed she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She described moments of physical disability and the struggle of living with the illness. And still, even long after the headlines faded, people in Selma continued to debate what happened. Some believe she got away with murder. Some believe she survived a prison of another kind long before she ever saw a jail cell. Some believe she was both victim and villain, because real life doesn't always fit neatly into one box. And the hardest truth of all is this: no verdict can undo what those 3 girls lost. A father in the ground. A mother forever tied to the word killer in the public mind. And a childhood marked by a case the world wouldn't stop watching. So here's the question that remains even now. When Mary Winkler said she found nerve and self-esteem and her ugly came out, was she describing the moment she finally defended herself? Or was she confessing in her own strange way that she made a choice and lived with the consequences? Was Mary Winkler a victim, a villain, or a complicated mix of both? If you were on that jury, what would you have done? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more true crime stories told with calm detail and the chilling truth behind the headlines, subscribe to Whispers of Crime. Because in places where everyone looks holy, sometimes the darkest secrets live right behind closed doors.